Welcome in to episode 335 of the Sources Say podcast, your go-to Kentucky basketball and recruiting podcast on the growing KSR Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Pilgrim of Kentucky Sports Radio. Very excited to be joined once again by the one and only Sean Smith. Sean, how the heck are you?
Fantastic. It's been a while. Feels good to be on here and talking about the latest developments. We're a little bit behind here. We haven't got to talk about Trent Noah. Obviously, another commitment today, Jack, but the weeks have been stacking up, and Mark Pope's been doing an excellent job.
Yeah, I guess I don't want to address that real quick. So had a little family health scare this week that obviously kind of put this on the back burner, put everything else on the back burner. Had a couple seizure scares with Billy. He was just kind of acting very not himself. Sent some videos over to our pediatrician, and they were very, very concerned and told us to rush over to the emergency room. And we spent 24 hours over at Norton Children's in Louisville and got some testing done. Unfortunately, everything came back clear and no, it was more just kind of a weird mix of behavioral and some other little minor things that kind of resulted in a very bizarre looking, kind of off-putting behavior for him that resembled like recurring seizures. So it was just a very, very traumatic. What the pediatrician thought it could have been was like life-changing potentially for him with developmentally and all that. So we went from him being totally fine waking up Tuesday morning to being in the hospital for 24 hours thinking that our lives were going to be flipped upside down. So needless to say, it's been just an absolute whirlwind, and I just had to take a minute and couldn't really fit a show in a timely manner. So apologies, but glad that everything worked out fine, and he is totally healthy, and we are good to go. And very, very excited to be talking about positive and fun things rather than just an absolute nightmare of a week. So all is good in our world now, Sean.
Yeah, definitely glad when you text and stuff yesterday and said that there was good news, and now I'm even better that we're able to talk Kentucky basketball and get on track with what we're wanting to do here and things, Jack. But like what Mark Pope has been doing over the course of a month is super impressive. And I feel like it gets even more impressive by the week, just when you think things are going to slow down. And I know finalizing this roster may be some of the more difficult parts of roster construction because you've already got so much in place that maybe to some it makes it easier because then you know what you can sell and pitch. But it also could make it difficult at times too, because somebody sees so many bodies there that it's like, where do I fit? But the additions that they've made over the last week, both of them make sense from a stylistic point of view, but also within the program and what this program needs. And I think that Mark Pope continues to do an excellent job building this roster and then getting into what this thing looks like here to finalize it over the coming weeks.
So we didn't get a chance to talk about Trent Noah. It's been like 9 days since his commitment. It's been so long, just the timing did not work out for it. So huge. I mean, this was something that you knew was coming once he officially backed out of his, letter of intent to South Carolina. You knew that when he says, I want to go closer to home, I want to play closer to home, I want to represent my state, when he's saying all of those things, he's kind of taking a leap of faith. And we talked about that a little bit where, there was no behind the scenes tampering. There was no, like, this was this kid needing to take a risk for himself and say, I think I'm good enough. I'm the fifth leading scorer in the history of KHSAA basketball, 29.9 points per game, 10.4 rebounds, sharpshooter, just go down a list of accolades. He kind of had to trust himself that Mark Pope would have a spot for him. And it was really cool to see how quickly that unfolded to where he backs out of his letter of intent. And then 24 hours later, he is signed to Kentucky and gives Kentucky a surprise 10th edition that, a week before that, nobody had really anticipated was coming. So you get the 10th edition. In terms of immediate impact, I know you're a big fan of him, Sean. I know that you have been a Trent Noah fan for forever. I mean, this is a kid that's been around the block and your neck of the woods for quite some time. So you knew that this is a kid that could make an impact at Kentucky. How early do you think that's going to happen now that he's officially signed, sealed, and delivered with Kentucky?
That's still tough to kind of identify. I think there's a couple of things that help him, obviously, and some of that would be his body. He's got a college-ready body, especially the lower body, and great size. He makes shots. I don't know if you may see some clips from where he dropped 30 on us this year. He was by far. We won that game, might I add. We won that game by about 13 or 14 points. So I was very pleased. That was my scout. I was in charge of that game. But I'll tell you this, my scout that I was in charge of, I was on the edge of my seat calling out sets, calling out things, and it didn't do a bit of good. He still got to where he wanted to on the floor against our athleticism, which then confirmed if you could do it against us, then you confirmed what I thought you could be, because we have a lot of athletes that project to be Division I players, and that athleticism, Jack, he was able to score it and do it over top of us and through us. Our guys went to the locker room impressed by him, which was another sign, because it takes a lot for our group to be impressed as well. And those things right there is what I kind of looked at the most. And when I left there that day, I said, this is going to be a kid that's going to do a lot of good in the SEC. I just didn't think it would be at Kentucky, because I didn't expect John Calipari to kind of fold up the tent and move on to another location. But getting Trent Noah in Kentucky blue is such a massive thing for that area of the state. And the 13th region now has back-to-back Kentucky basketball players. I don't know if people really, truly understand how big of a deal that is for that part of the state in the 606. I mean, you've had women's basketball players. You had Blair Green. You've had Macy Morris. Now you've had Trent Noah, Reed Shepard. Like the list is starting to grow with talent in that area going on to play at Kentucky and being Division I level talents. And he's a guy, Jack, that if he makes shots and he defends and shows the capability on that end of the floor, his body and his shot making can get him on the floor. But I just don't know how deep Mark Pope's going to go with this roster. But this is a guy that it wouldn't shock me if he stays in this program. He'll be a starter one day at Kentucky.
So the quote that Mark Pope gave was pretty cool. He said, I think he's got a chance to be the heart and soul of this team over the next several years. He's going to raise up at some point, and he is going to win us a massively huge game. It might take a while to get there. We don't know, but he's going to win us some massively huge games. I'm telling you, I think about this kid. I think about the great Kentucky players that have come before and won huge games for us. I think he's going to be one of those guys. So this was a kid that Mark Pope did not just bring in because he wanted to add to the Kentucky boy legacy. I think that this is going to be something that we will need to address at some point moving forward, that this is not going to be just an in-state turnstile of just signing the best player in the state every single year, because those numbers will add up to where if they're all 3 to 4 year players, there's going to be an overlap to where you can't have 6 or 7 or 8 of them on any single roster. You got to be able to just kind of piece it together. But if they're top level Kentucky level talents, then you can make a couple of them work more so than if you're just adding just for the name. That's not who Trent Noah is. Trent Noah is a kid that was projected to go to South Carolina in year one and play 15, 20 minutes a game. Like, you talk to people around that program, and they were pretty bummed out to lose Trent Noah just from a pure on paper fit, what he brought to the table perspective, not about where he came from, Kentucky, the other accolades that went along with it. This was a kid that Mark Pope wanted to add because he's a dang good player and is going to make an impact. How early? I think you nailed it. I think you get the benefit of the doubt with Pope because he does tend to run a deeper bench. If you look at just his numbers historically, he likes to have a 10-man rotation where guys are playing 10 to 29 minutes a game. He never goes above and beyond. He never has guys at the he kind of likes to stay in that middle ground. Can he be one of those 10? We'll see how these next couple spots fill out. Adding another addition that we got today. We'll talk about that here in a second. But he's going to be in the conversation. But what I like about the Trent Noah addition is that you could trust him to come in day one and make shots. You can trust him day one to make plays. And I think that the roster is just being loaded with those types of guys, Sean. There aren't any project pieces where you're just not, I mean, they're a year away from being a year away. Everybody on this roster, Colin Chandler, even the young guys, Travis Perry, you know exactly what those guys can bring to the table year one if they were to be inserted in the game at any point. So I like that the core group, the up till today, the 10-man group had been nothing but core pieces that are capable of playing right away. Again, still missing that top end star talent, but that middle group is pretty darn competitive, and Trent Noah fits that mold to perfection. I love that he's already 6'6", growing to 6'7", kind of that, he's projects as a 2-3, but he's got some size, and if he can match with the athleticism, he's more fundamentally sound than he is pure athlete, but he also has some stuff to him that doesn't just make him a slow-footed white guy from the mountains. Like, he's got another gear or two to him that he just projects really, really well with a strength and conditioning program that you can really see a vision with Trent Noah for him to make an impact at some point. Love that addition. And I also love, let's keep on moving down the list, today's edition of Fairleigh Dickinson's Ansley Almonor, a kid that, I think that the order of operations is pretty interesting because Kentucky is all out, going all in on Jaxson Robinson of BYU and Chaz Lanier of North Florida. Those are the top two guys, neck and neck, pushing all your chips in there. So you were wondering, the way Mark Pope had been talking about filling out this roster, he had kind of said, we're going to try to add two quickly in the next couple of weeks and then have a 13th floating piece for that last scholarship spot. However, Cody Feger said, we're going to use that 13th spot. No matter what, this is going to be a full 13-man group, which is news. We were wondering that, asking those questions a couple of weeks back, Sean, as things were kind of ramping up with new additions kind of by the day. We got confirmation there will be 13, but I kind of had a hunch that a guy like Ansley Almonor would be kind of that 13th floating guy. I love him. I think he's a great addition, but I thought they would do whatever it took to land the first two first, or one or the other, or however you can land them. I thought that would be the top priorities, and kind of hold some guys in your back pocket, keep some seats warm. Very clearly loved this kid, thought the visit went extremely well. I'd heard on my end that this kid had been dreaming of playing at Kentucky, had pretty solid offers elsewhere at the mid-major level to be a star with really solid NIL money. But once this call came from Mark Pope, it was game over. He wanted to be at Kentucky, no questions asked. It kind of fit the exact mold that you look for with what Mark Pope said at his introductory press conference. You want those types of guys to be around your program, so you bring him in for what he brings to the table, as knowing what his role is going to be as the backup stretch four. All it took was a competitive offer. Just make it interesting for me. And that's exactly what Kentucky did. I heard that he's going to make a solid amount of money to be a backup for stretch four at Kentucky. That's the exact type of guy that you want to sign up to be your 11th man, a guy who's signing up for a very specific role that fits Mark Pope's offense to a T. I could not be more pleased with the offense, with the addition of Ansley. The timing is what is more interesting to me, Sean.
Yeah, I'm with you on the timing. And what's the total number of made threes this last season? Was it like 91, 92?
93.
So between him and Kobe Bray, that you're talking about dudes that have right around the century mark and made threes, in a season. Like guys that have proven they can make shots. And when you watch him and you turn on the tape here, it's the ability to slide off the basketball and put himself in position to take and make shots, like at a high level. Like that is what Mark Pope is piecing together with this roster, is shot makers, guys that can stretch the floor, space you out. I think his size is important here, about 6'7", the ability to step out, shoot the three, play that stretch four that you talked about in a backup role. And that's something, look there, that's against some zone. So you got zone busters. I mean, you got guys that are going to make you pay. Always hands ready, shot ready. When you see it, that form looks good, Jack. Like that's a guy that's going to play a key role and put a ton of pressure on you defensively off the bench or whatever role it ends up being when the season gets started. But one more note back on Trent Noah. We're talking about a kid that scored 62 points at one point in a game, Jack. And it was against Middlesbrough. And I get it. You can knock and say, well, it's 13th region competition. I don't care what level of competition you're playing. When you score 62 points, pretty damn good. So he played high-level AAU basketball. He showcased his game around this state this year. A lot of people in this area of the state where we live weren't maybe familiar. They were familiar with the name, but not familiar with what he could do with when you see it with your own two eyes. Played in the King of the Bluegrass this year. Played us in the heart of Lexington the same night Kentucky played Tennessee at Rupp Arena. Like, he played at the state tournament and put on a show. Those things, I think, then proved, okay, this is why South Carolina was so in on this kid early. Why hadn't Kentucky got involved? And now that Mark Pope is here, that move made a ton of sense. This one today as a style play and a guy that fits your roster makes a ton of sense as well. You look across this thing, Jack, guys that can make threes, guys that can shoot the basketball, no dead spots on this roster. He's also mixed in some elite defenders, which is probably the most important ingredient of what he's done all offseason. But those two additions in the last week are shot makers, not just shot takers, they're shot makers. And you can say that for a lot of guys on this roster. That is a breath of fresh air that you're going to see 1 through 5 at times on this roster, but especially 2, 3, and 4. I think you're going to see multiple guys that can take and make shots. Those two fit the mold.
And Anthony Eason in the chat says, congrats on outbidding Siena, with, clearly laughing at it. But I hope that he understands, and the fan base, when you see the list of who Kentucky, who he committed to Kentucky over, where it is Siena was the top competition, Iona, some of these other obviously mid-major levels, and that Kentucky did outbid those schools for this kid. Understand that this is a kid that is signing up for the 11th man role at Kentucky versus being the number 1 at a mid-major. Like, that's how you fill out rosters. That's how you add depth. That's how you, when you go back to the Jaden Quaintances of the world, when you go to Great Osobor, the guys that are high dollar individual talents, where yes, they might have, project as stars at some time, depending on when Jaden pans out, having to have a kind of a very specific role built out for Great Osobor, but he would be an All-American level player at that role. Also understand that you are allocating a lot of your salary cap space to go all in with one individual guy, where then you can't afford to add a guy of this caliber this late in the game as one of your end of bench pieces, who is a 40% 3-point shooter on 7 attempts a game. That's kind of the difference between some of these championship contender teams and teams that don't pan out, because without the leftover money, they are buying low on project bigs, getting reclasses from guys that are way too young to make an impact. Some of those different factors where you're able to get a proven commodity, a first team all conference player whose dream school truly was Kentucky, coming in saying, I'm totally okay with these minutes. I'm totally okay with these shots because I want to win games at the University of Kentucky. I was a part of a Fairleigh Dickinson team that was a 16 seed that knocked off number 1 Purdue. I want to be a part of the blue blood. I've been a star at the mid-major level. I want to prove I can do it at the highest of high, knowing what my role is going to be. That's the difference between competitive teams and teams that flame out because they don't have the depth. Because when you bring in a 7-foot guy that's not going to 3 years away from competing, you bring that guy in whenever there's foul trouble or injury struggles or whatever. You now have a guy that you can trust in any given moment to come in and make shots. You trust him to come in and he guarded in that Fairleigh Dickinson Purdue game. He guarded Zach Edey straight up. His box score numbers weren't overly impressive. He scored 1 point in that game, but he's a guy that helped win a game against Zach Edey by guarding him straight up. So there are little different nuances that we just have to remember in this era of college basketball, where there is a pot of money and you only have so much to go around and you got to build a 13-man roster from the ground up, that's how you get your 11th man, is by being able to outbid schools like Siena for a first-team all-conference player. You're kind of using your argument against you for what we're talking about, what we're adding. You don't get that level of talent this late in the game by not outbidding schools. And I'm glad that we have the leftover funds to be able to do that.
There's one thing that I look at when it comes to how you add transfers in the transfer portal era, and especially at Kentucky, since this is going to be a thing that we're going to have to monitor moving forward, even more so this year with a whole new roster overhaul and things. Are you consistent? In which direction are you consistent? Because you can be consistent in the wrong way too. But his numbers over the course of his career, Jack, are not just consistent, they're consistently good. And they consistently stay around a certain number, but they also, some areas also progress and get better. And like when you're talking about 3-point shooting, 34.3% in his first year of college in limited opportunities, 38.1 from three the next year on 197 3-point attempts. Number climbs to 39.4 this year, and he took 236. So shot volume goes up, shot 3-point percentage goes up. That's a good sign at this point in your career. Free throw percentage too, 86% free throw shooter a year ago, 80% this year. That's another area where you can contribute and make shots and get points. So turnovers a little high, I think, is an area that maybe stands out about his game, that for that position, you don't want to see a guy turn it over 55, 60 times a season. If you're not a primary ball handler, that's probably something that can probably be reined in a little more when it comes to more ball dominant guards that Kentucky will have on the perimeter, the 1, 2, and 3. But overall, I think you look at this is a play that makes sense, especially if it's in a role coming off the bench. Like, you can't ask for more than a guy that can be a 40% 3-point shooter coming off your bench and at the volume that he takes shots. Like, this is a good fit. I feel like all the pieces here, and you brought it up earlier, the star's missing. Like, who's the star? And I think that's probably the reason you're seeing some people out there hold off on what they expect Kentucky to be on the high end. You see them, are they even a top 25 team to some? No. Some probably have them there. Some people don't even have them in the top 30. I don't know if that's just erring on the side of caution when it comes to what this thing can actually look like, but there's a lot of proven guys that have played a lot of college basketball that have success, that you blend this thing together, and this could be a top 15 basketball team if it all comes together, even if it doesn't land the star firepower. The system itself is what's going to create and make Kentucky. But the system has to have pieces that fit and don't disrupt. It fits. The only concern I would have if I'm Mark Pope is keeping all these pieces happy, because you're mixing in a lot of dudes and a lot of new roles that are used to kind of being different pieces in their other programs. Those are conversations that I'm sure have already been had. And if you come in with expectations and maybe you outperform those, that's a good thing. That's probably the challenge when it all comes together, though, is how does it all fit? But on paper, it looks like it does. It's just, can you get it all to fit when it matters most? I would trust this staff to do that.
And like Keith Shanks asked in the chat, Sean Wood says, no way this team can meet expectations due to high number of transfers. Your thoughts and regular season record predictions? Obviously, I don't think we're ready to give a regular season prediction until we know if we can add the stars they're looking to add, because that completely changes what the floor and ceiling look like. But I guess to address the first part, I don't know if there are expectations yet. Like, I don't even know if you could look at this team right now and say, I'm expecting them to go to the Elite Eight. Like, well, what are you basing that off of? I don't expect them to make the NCAA tournament. Well, based on what? This is a brand new coach bringing together 13 new pieces that haven't been here the year before, that have never played for Coach Pope, Jaxson Robinson being the only exception if you are able to bring him out of the draft. You have there is no expectation right now. You are going in based entirely on hope, knowing that the system is what it is, and it's a pretty dang brilliant system that Mark Pope has established up to this point, where he has been able to put together a bunch of different moving parts and make it move like a well-oiled machine. you're kind of just having blind faith with the process. So I don't think there's even a spectrum here to say, well, they're clearly not good enough to to even make the NCAA tournament versus, oh, this is very clearly a championship roster. You kind of just have to guess and say, well, I think that you have the shooting, you have the scoring, you have the rebounding, you have the defense, you have the experience, you have the depth. Odds are good in today's college basketball landscape with good coaching that's probably going to mesh, and you're probably going to put together a Sweet 16, Elite 8, potential Final Four contender. But I think it all kind of lands on how these last two spots go. You have 11 spots. You are going after Jaxson Robinson. You are going after Chaz Lanier. They're going after both of them. They're not going after just one. They want both. Can you land both? And if not, you got to land one, because I do think that could be the difference between the floor. Like, you got to have a guy that, in my opinion, I know there's some people that disagree. I think that the system itself is good for 8 to 10 points a game, whatever the margin you want to consider it. I think the system itself is good for a nice little cushion, but you still need a guy when push comes to shove, when you get to crunch time, when things collapse, when you're going against a good defense. Sometimes you're just going to have better offense with a playmaker, with a guy who can go get his own shot. I think that is the one thing that this roster is missing. I'd love to have two of them, and I think Chaz Lanier and Jaxson Robinson are both fit that mold. But I think you at least have to get one. But I do trust the system to kind of mask some of those other issues elsewhere to where you don't need both. I would love both, but you have to have one.
Well, and there's been a lot of talk too with people that have talked to me about, about Chaz's numbers when it comes to overall, at North Florida, is you kind of were and then all of a sudden you just pop in your final year there. But when you really dive into it, I mean, volume plays a significant role in what you do, Jack. And when you look at it and you go from taking sophomore season 106 shots overall and 119 as a junior to 420 this year, your numbers are going to pop. It's like that's going to go. It's certainly going to help you go in the points per game category, but then you dive into it and 3-point percentage was at 39.1 a year ago, and it's at 44 coming off this season. Like, that's some consistency there. But the volume went up, the numbers went up. That's a good sign to me. So even though he doesn't have maybe the proven record of 2 to 3 years that Kerr and some of these other guys on this roster have, you've got it in volume and a very, very big scorer, shot maker, a guy that can get his own. He done enough on tape when you look at him this season to show that he can come here and do that. And I know that's probably Tennessee's pitch as well, for a guy like that when it comes to, Dalton Connect and things like that with the, it's hard to bill who's the next Dalton Connect, because I don't think anyone besides maybe Rick Barnes saw Dalton Connect being Dalton Connect. But that's a pitch that's probably being made in the transfer portal now, especially if you've had a guy that's already done it once. Kentucky, you don't have the same staff, but you could have made that same pitch with an Antonio Reeves. So there's those guys the last couple of years that have kind of taken off and become possible NBA draft picks, some of them top 5, top 10 picks. You can pitch it if you've coached it. And there are guys out there that you can kind of sell the blueprint on, and he fits kind of that mold.
And you can kind of, I hate doing this, but you can kind of steal the work that Cal did for Antonio Reeves and say, well, our system puts up more threes than what that system did. And if Antonio Reeves was able to be the all-time leading scorer under John Calipari, what could you do for me with a better system, with better spacing, with better shot volume? You can kind of steal the, well, we've seen a mid-major become a star at Kentucky, but now you can even do it more so under me. Like you could kind of use both pots to steal from it. But I think that's the take. And I think just talking about what the speculation is around the draft combine right now, obviously Chaz Lanier did not get invited to the combine. He was solid, okay, not bad, not great at the G League Elite camp. Kind of similar boat to Antonio Reeves last offseason, where you just kind of felt like he needed one more year to show what he can do at the next level. And it's weird. It depends on who you talk to about who's leading for Chaz Lanier. Some people around the Nashville area that you talk to think that the Tennessee pipeline's kind of blown out of proportion, that it's not just, I think there were some family ties, some different, a couple different things, that there was just this overwhelming assumption that when he hit the portal that Tennessee was the school to lure him out of North Florida and into the portal. And you talk to some people around that area that know him, know how he operates. They think that's blown out of proportion. He likes Tennessee, has always liked Tennessee, but Kentucky has presented a pretty bang up pitch, and it is giving him something tough to think about. And it's a cop out thing to say, but it does truly feel like a toss up. I know people are saying 65-35 one school or whatever, and I just don't think that. I think both schools have their own unique pitches for him. I think money is going to be there for both schools. I think the role is very clear for both schools as well. Tennessee is pitching the Dalton Connect role for him, and it's a really, really tough thing to beat if you're Kentucky. I mean, that's just the best case scenario for a mid-major making the jump, now becoming a lottery pick. I mean, you could not ask for a better pitch. So I think a lot of people are just connecting those dots, but there is a really, really strong appeal with Kentucky, and make no mistake about it, they are putting all of their chips in on him. And I think the unique thing with the way Mark Pope is operating right now is, like I kind of talked about earlier, they kind of had some money set aside. They had enough to say, if we get to the end of the race and we need to kind of push all of our chips in on a guy financially, we're going to have the resources. They couldn't put themselves in a position to overspend early and then need a star late and go, I got $20. Like, you couldn't put yourself in that position. You had to have some wiggle room there at the very end. And fortunately, they have done that, and they do have enough to be able to get both if necessary. If it comes to that, is it likely to say that they're going to land both? I don't think that's probably fair, but they are looking to land both. I think Chaz Lanier is going to be a quick decision. I think that's going to be something that we hear in the coming days, but they've put themselves in a position where I think they know the emergency aspect of this, where you got to probably land both of them. And I think Wooga Poplar's still in that conversation of guys. He's visiting, talked to his dad today, visiting Villanova right now, in the process of scheduling a visit with Oregon. That's only 2 on the docket right now. Still said that they are interested in visiting Kentucky. That could be in the works at some point, but not something that has materialized to the point of, we got a visit scheduled. They want us to come in and see what the next steps are. It kind of felt like they know they're all in on Chaz and Jaxson, and Wooga is kind of the fallback if you can't land either of them. So they're in a, like you said, to kind of start the show, they're in a good spot, but they're in a tricky spot because the rest of the roster's packed. You got to just land one. You got to figure out you can't strike out on both.
No, it's easy to sell to 1, 2, and 3 when there's nothing there. It's harder to sell to number 11 and 12 when there's 1 through 10 there, which maybe leads me into this a little bit too, Jack. Is there any concerns about taking 13? And 13, obviously, like there's going to be a guy or two on this roster that you look at probably as like a development thing. Like, I do think that's maybe the plan or idea for some guys that they naturally develop within this program. If they outperform those early expectations, great. Then your team's probably better than what you expect it to be. Is there any concern, though, of any kind of domino effect that if you take too many, that maybe some guys start to get cold feet on what their role could be?
If it's Chaz Lanier and Jaxson Robinson as those pieces, I don't care. As long as it's not Kobe Brea, I think I feel pretty good with and again, I love this roster. I love everybody on there. I think everybody can contribute in different unique ways, whether it's defense or sharpshooting or playmaking or rebounding or whatever. Everybody kind of has their own little niche, but none of them are stars. None of them have that ceiling changing stardom that you can say about both of them. Chaz Lanier, like, depending on who you talk to, I've talked to a ton of different NBA front office people, scouts. that when they talk about Chaz Lanier, it's like we want to love him so bad because everything that we've seen with his advanced analytics, it's unprecedented. He's in a whole different category in terms of volume and efficiency that it breaks all of our charts. But he has only done it in 1 year. Is he a one-hit wonder, or is this something that we can really, really bank on long term? And they just couldn't get there, knowing that there is no sample size with this beyond one single year of otherworldly numbers.
And it's at North Florida.
And that's what that's the missing piece. They think we love it, we want to believe, but we'll believe it a whole heck of a lot easier next year at a Kentucky or Tennessee versus right now. So I think that was the unique spot, but I think that's a good position for us to be in, where if you are in need of a star, this is a guy that NBA scouts are drooling over, but just want to see him do it at the next level. Again, that blind faith we kind of talked about to start the show of how good this team can be. What better way to kind of really go in blind with this year with a guy who has the star potential, but was a superstar of all superstars at North Florida. Can he be and Dalton connect, or is he going to be a guy that struggles to make the adjustment? That's a Pope call.
I'm with you though. That is, if you get one, then I think you feel a whole lot better about what this team could be long-term potential in the season. But Mark Pope had a vision. And he had it before there was ever even a dude outside of Travis Perry on this roster. And that vision is starting to come together. And it's very strategic, the additions that they've made to this point, which is probably the most impressive thing about it. Like, it is clear cut that they targeted physicality and defense early on with this. That was the address thing. That is the area that they struggled in at BYU. Was that due to because you couldn't get the caliber of players there that you can get at a place like Kentucky? That definitely played a role, Jack. You get better athletes at Kentucky. You get better talent at Kentucky. You're naturally going to be more gifted. Then you kind of transition in and you start adding the guys that can stretch the floor. And then they go get their backcourt and they get shooting. And now they're the pieces that they've added. You got those pieces that can be pillars to your program, like a Trent Noah, who you could realistically see. I mean, not everybody's going to be a Reed Shepherd and walk in the door and be a lottery pick after year one. Trent and Travis Perry are guys that, if they stick around, can grow within this program and kind of be those pillar pieces that you lean on down 2 or 3 years from now. Strategically piecing the roster together, and now it comes down to those final spots, and those spots are maybe identified to be like, okay, we need a guy. We need an actual guy that can kind of go get it. And you got a couple of targets there that you're looking at. And I think that that's probably the way this was meant to kind of go, is it's like, all right, here's my vision. Here's everything in front of you. Here's the role that you can step into and walk into. That's probably the part that makes it easier to sell, is because there's maybe not guys like those guys on this roster. But it's going to be entertaining to see where this thing falls and what boom gifts and stuff do we get here coming down the stretch, because we know that there's still spots to fill. And I think it's super encouraging that Mark Pope and the staff had a plan all along to fill all those spots. I think that's another thing that's a positive in the right direction. Like, if you got scholarships, use them. In today's game, in the transfer portal era where people can just dip on you at any point, use them. Like, there's no reason to have available scholarships unless you're going to get a guy that's maybe a reclass or something at some point. But outside of that, fill them. Fill all those rosters, fill all those scholarships, because you can fill it again if somebody decides to leave and you have an exodus out of your program.
And that's why I got to see the first domino to fall. I will feel so much better. I just kind of feel in this wishy-washy. It's great. I love every single piece that we've gotten up to this point. And I do think that, like I said earlier, the system is going to kind of mask some of those flaws where you don't need a guy to go hunt buckets every single possession. Like, I'd like it in break in case of emergency situations, but the system will do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. But man, I'll feel just a whole lot better the day you get Chaz Lanier commits this week or next week. It's going to happen in short order. But if you can close on him, and then just say next week and beyond, when the deadline is in the end of May, so you have 2 full weeks, hard weeks of recruiting Jaxson Robinson here, to say we already got a 20-point per game guy. I feel good about where things stand. Let's just go swing for the fence and see if we can get them both. Let's just see if we can really make this a Final Four team and say, screw it. We landed not only a really, really, really deep and talented roster up to this point, where there isn't one guy in the roster, Sean, that you look at and say that guy can't play right now. Everybody on the roster has, there's 26 years of college experience, D1 experience on this roster right now. And that's not including a old freshman in Colin Chandler, who's now 6'6", which I think is really, really cool kind of shift of what our trajectory was for him. But a guy that Travis Perry, he's going to come in and make shots. Trent Noah is going to come in and make shots. There's not one liability on this roster. But, man, the day they land either of those two and then can turn to the other of the two and just swing for the fences and say, screw it, let's build a Final Four team, I'm going to feel really, really good soon. I feel good right now.
Let's cover the other side of this too, just for the fun of it. You don't get either one of them.
That's not fun. I knew you were going to say that, and I don't think that's fun.
But how do you feel though? How do you feel about what they have now? And still add some pieces, but maybe not the two that you're identified and you want the most, that you kind of covet there. How do you feel about it? Is it enough? Like, obviously on paper, to people, it's not going to be everybody's preseason Final Four selection, but it's still a lot of dudes that are well-traveled in college basketball that have had a lot of success. And we keep talking about this system and how we trust this system. They've added some really, really solid elite defenders. Like, is this a team that could still be a second weekend, depending on matchup, make a run in the NCAA tournament with what they have right now as a core?
You probably feel safe calling that the ceiling, though. Like, I just don't know if I could get there if you don't add one of those two in
and
saying that.
The safe point, regardless, honestly,
right,
is the ceiling is second weekend. Just because we just don't know. Like, we don't know. I wish this was the year you had a global jam that you could go to, or you had
champs, baby, gold medals.
But like, I wish this were a year you could go to the Bahamas, or you could get a global jam top trip, and you could kind of get some cohesiveness in those areas, because I feel like you could need it. But I guess the one encouraging side of this is there's been so much movement in college basketball, and you've got guys on this roster that have played at multiple spots and multiple stops, that they've transitioned and done it with different teammates every single year. Yeah, John Calipari was doing the complete overhaul of a roster every single year. Just because other teams weren't doing it didn't mean that they weren't playing with 3 or 4 new faces every single year that were important. Like Kerr and all these other guys, they've played with multiple different guards and bigs. So, like, I don't think that when you've played 100 games of college basketball, the transition to playing with new faces, it's not as difficult is what it may seem. It's just, do they have enough to get it done? And does the system itself, Jack, add value and add wins to March Madness? I'm to the point where if you've got a system and you have a philosophy and it is strong and your foundation is solid and it fits together, I think it can kind of carry you in that tournament. And I believe that Kentucky's kind of building that together. The best is still years away, 2 and 3 and 4. But what Mark Pope has pieced together already, I still like, and I still think that this could be a team that settles in and can make a run. I don't know if they can win it all, but I certainly think that they can at least win an NCAA tournament game, which in a first weekend, which would be a significant step in the right direction given the last few years.
Steve is in the chat saying, I can't believe we didn't cut down the nets at the Miami Athletic Center in Toronto. Gosh, what a ridiculous.
Why are there so many Tennessee fans in this chat right now?
I'm losing brain cells reading them. I just need to just ignore them, but they're just all just blowing my mind with the stupidity. But I think some of the stuff out there and speculation about Jaxson Robinson, just to kind of pivot just a little bit. There's a lot of random like Kansas buzz. Like Hunter Dickinson tweeted about him today, about his like watching his Twitter follows and all that. Some people that I've talked to close to Jaxson and his recruitment just would be shocked, just frankly, if that was the landing spot. Some people associated with Kansas recruiting, that other guys that they've landed that have, kind of just knowing the financials of it and how much they have tied up with other guys and knowing what Jaxson costs just in general to pull him out of the draft, what it would cost. They just don't think the money would even be there for Kansas. So I get it. You're in this you're in this void of information where this kid is just so focused on the draft right now. And there's a lot of buzz just frankly about him just staying in the draft, that he's old for his grade. He's a kid that really kind of hit right place, right time with Mark Pope at BYU, to where his draft stock is pretty darn high, where you could see him, landing in the 40, early 40s, or maybe late 30s, something like that, but early second round range, where that's a guy that, is going to get a good guaranteed deal and start his professional clock. Like, there's a lot of value in that. We talk about that a lot with a guy like Chris Livingston, where it's like, sometimes guys, Jacob Toppin, sometimes guys are just ready to turn pro and are just looking for that one little extra nudge, maybe financially with a guarantee, or just, a safety net of sorts. Sometimes people fit that, and you talk to some people that know Jaxson and just kind of where he came from, and just he's bounced around at a couple different schools. Does he really want to hit reset again at his fourth school? No, even though whether he trusts Pope and knows he'll be able to kind of catapult him into where he, stardom that he's looking for, there's still just that, man, is it just time for me to take the next step? And that's kind of what's weighing on him. His stock, it's not like this is a kid that's currently undrafted that's trying for just one last shot. Like, this is a kid that's already in the draft range. And if he can feel pretty confident about his name being called in a comfortable spot, there is some pull there for him to go. But even as of today, that you talk to some people, it's a 50-50 that he stays or goes, that he likes the draft idea, but he also knows that if he goes to a high platform, under a kind of a bigger spotlight, there is a chance that he could kind of jump into that end of the first round with a star season next year. So that is where Kentucky comes into play. And those same people still would be absolutely shocked if it's anywhere but Kentucky. So again, that's just talking to people that know Jaxson and have been grown up with him and been around him and know just how he operates. They'd be shocked. But, at this point, I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Chaz or Jaxson, preferably both, but one or the other. I just want one of them to feel really, really, really good about how next season goes. I think you're one key piece. And if not, you got to hit a home run on a reclass. You got to go overseas, find an international kid that is looking to join in July or August and hitting that realm. You're still one key piece away, in my opinion. But
you know what I'm going to ask next.
What happens if you don't land any of those?
No. I'm not getting into that. I had to throw that out there because I wanted to kind of just at least talk about it, because you never know today. But last year I kept saying mid-May, and it stretched into July. So June, like, are we going to be into June when this thing's final and set, or?
Man, that's tough. That really is tough. But are you not would you not call it set for the most part if you do land Chaz next week? Like,
I'm talking every single piece.
Ooh, that's tough, because then you really could wait for because if you do somehow land Chaz and Jaxson, then you can really well, I guess you're out of scholarships at that point. But if you land one and miss on the other, I think that you are in a position to where you can maybe take a bigger shot on a project, on a high risk, high reward potentially kid from, whatever this version of Big Z is, whatever the overseas didn't want to keep his name in the draft. He's exploring college. He wants to have one last shot in college before going to, you could take a shot on somebody like that if you don't get both of Chaz and Jaxson. So if you land one, I think it is going to be July. I think it is going to be, or if you don't land both, it is definitely going to be July or August. If not, I think we'll be done end of May. I mean, very, very early June at the latest, because I don't think Jaxson Robinson I think he's going to be the longest to make a decision, and I don't think he's going to take long if he does decide to pull his name out.
Do you remember last year when we had our NBA withdrawal deadline episode?
We went at midnight and we had
everybody it's like everything kind of came together at once, and they had nobody besides Fred. and then
we ended the show going, yeah, this might really suck. We didn't get Oscar, didn't get
players on the roster,
didn't get Livingston, and now Antonio Reeves wants to leave. So who's going to be on our team? I hope Jordan Burke. We didn't even have Jordan Burks and Joey Hart at that point. We were bare freaking bones of the freshman class, and that was it.
What a journey that was, going through the summer. And then the morning that we rolled over and the sun came up and Big Z had committed to Kentucky via blue background Instagram.
I like Kentucky. I like John Calipari. Go Cats. I am committed. It's just like, you could have at least been a little bit more eloquent, buddy. I mean, we know you got it. I know we dealt with the English situation with the TOEFL exam and all that, but we know you got it. Could have been a little bit more, throwing some more pizzazz out there whenever he decided to make his abrupt 8 a.m. commitment to Kentucky. Gosh, just think about even the last week, how ridiculous the news cycle has been with John Calipari and the staying above the tin roof and having to rooming with Brad Calipari and having earplugs in to sleep at night, and just did called the Hogs, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, he's one of us now. It's such a weird dynamic to know that we're even in this timeline right now, talking about whether or not Mark Pope's superstar is going to follow him from BYU, not, hey, what does year 2 of DJ Wagner look like in Lexington? It still just hasn't even clicked with me that this is reality. I think it's gonna hit. Zach and I leave tomorrow early afternoon for Indianapolis for the first session of EYBL, and we're going to see Pope and his assistants wearing Kentucky blue, Kentucky across their chest, recruiting the next generation of high school talent for the first time. I think that's going to be really, really weird and bizarre, but I don't know when the actual. It might just be whenever they coach their first game. I think it might just be when they roll out, maybe for the first exhibition game or something. But when reality hits that this is our current reality, it still blows my mind looking at our KSR logo and seeing Mark Pope next to it, not Coach Cal in his suit.
It's different, and it still hasn't set into me how different it is. I think it will finally hit, though, that maybe around Big Blue Madness to me. That's when you actually finally look at it and go, oh, this is different. This is going to be significantly different. But, here we are. We got a full summer of recruiting to talk about, and I'm excited to see the direction that this staff takes it when it comes to who they're targeting, who they're watching. I know you're going to be able to tell that, and I'm going to be at another circuit just across the state line in another state, hopefully winning some games there. But I'm sure you'll be updating and everything from Indy and things. I wish I could make it over for that too. But a lot of fun stuff coming up. The summer's here. This roster's almost complete. And now we can kind of start diving in, Jack, and seeing exactly what Kentucky's going to recruit and what they're going to aim to do on the recruiting trail of high school talent moving forward.
Ernest, I want to ask you this. If you have any quick questions in the chat, we'll answer a couple of them before we get out of here. But Ernest Kirk Belcher says, will Otega Owe make a big jump this year? We talk about Lanier coming in and doing great with better talent. What about Owe?
When you put him with a ton of spacing, he can kind of do the things that makes him elite. And if that's a guy that can consistently make shots and get to a certain percentage, then I think that he's I've been asked this question probably 15 times in the last week at work and other places where it's like, who's the one guy that you pick to outperform maybe expectations? And you can kind of go 3 or 4 different ways with this. He's probably a popular pick because I think that when you put the pieces around him, the way he plays, he can get 2 feet in the paint, he can touch the paint, do those things. He's going to be able to defend. He's going to be able to get out and run. That's a guy that can really do some things that maybe some other guys on this roster can't, Jack, that maybe he's the guy that pops. I think that he could have a big jump. I would expect him to maybe be – the thing to me with this is you're going to have guys like Kobe Bryant that have been so efficient that even if there's some regression in their efficiency, it's still really, really good. Like, there are guys that are being added here to this roster that's been so efficient that have been among some of the best in efficiency numbers in college basketball at certain areas. There's also going to be guys that when you get them in the system, their efficiency is going to go up and probably be the highest it's ever been. So that's where it's kind of tough to tell of who pops and who maybe is just really, really good, that maybe you don't get that increase, but what they were stays the same, and it's still among the best. Advanced analytics, I think they're really going to like this team on the offensive end of the floor. The question will be, do they like them on the defensive end of the floor? You can recruit it and you can bring it in, but you still got to play it. And that'll be the thing that's probably the biggest question mark going forward here is, what does Mark Pope look like defensively at Kentucky? The blueprint's there offensively. It's what does it look like defensively?
Slightly switching gears here a little bit before we wrap up. Schedule announcement came out. A couple of them, actually. I'll ask about both. First, WKU hosting WKU this upcoming season. What do you think of that? And what do you think of the SEC's release that it will be one Kentucky-Arkansas matchup, and it will be inside Rupp Arena? I know a lot of fans wanted the home and home, where go down to Fayetteville and deal with their Super Bowl, where it's going to be T-shirt night down there. What is the vibe there? I think it's interesting. I do think that SEC maybe missed that opportunity, but I understand it would have been the 3rd consecutive year of that home and home, and they like to switch it up. And I just think for money reasons, it made no sense not to go all in with what would have been the biggest TV night of the year outside of the Rupp Arena trip.
They got the part right that they needed to get right. It's him coming to Rupp Arena. That's the part that they got right that I feel like was probably priority number 1, was making Cal come to Kentucky. I like the schedule. It's going to be different not playing Florida twice.
Mm-hmm.
Like, probably I would say that's the first time in my life that that's happened. I know they've had a year where they didn't go to Knoxville in 2014. Tennessee came to Rupp Arena, but Kentucky didn't go there. So I know that that's happened in the weird schedules and stuff when the league started to expand then. But overall, I mean, you get Alabama twice, you get Tennessee twice. So, I mean, you get the top end. I guess that's still the Kentucky effect of this, is you do get Vandy twice, but you still get 2 of the better programs in the league home and away. Overall, though, I like it. It's going to be different with this format. The Western Kentucky thing, and you know this, like I'm super close with that staff. I know that, Coach Lutz went on to Oklahoma State, but they had a lot of guys be retained and head coach that slid in there. I text one of my friends that's on their staff, and they're super excited about that.
Awesome.
Like that was the thing with me, is it's just such a good opportunity for everybody. It's a good program, and that's going to continue to be a program that's going to make the NCAA tournament and be in contention for postseason play and things. And I'm not just saying that because I like those guys so much, but overall, like, I think that that's a really good thing. I love seeing that. And I think it'll be a fun night for sure when that group comes to Rupp Arena. And they're recruiting one of our guys. So I like that too.
I will be watching that guy this weekend in Indianapolis. I'm looking forward to seeing our guy Mello ball out with Team Thad. It's going to be a lot of fun. Ernest Kirk Belcher says, can UK have private scrimmages like teams did last year in the summer? Pope talked about it. I think that's what needs to happen. I think I get it financially. It makes a lot of sense to have some of these smaller schools come to Rupp, and it's good to have butts and seats inside Rupp Arena, but it is also really, really good for your team to get an early punch in the face, to see what it looks like, to kind of just get a measuring stick. If we're not going to have a global jam, if we're not going to have a Bahamas trip, if we're not going to have one of those things, go above and beyond with that exhibition slate. Go get one of those secret scrimmages. Put yourself kind of out there. You're not going to get St. John's this year. You're not going to get the Maui Invitational. Some of these other, the NIL tournament in Vegas. Some of these other ones that they're building. That those things are already kind of overloading themselves to the 2025 slate, 2026. Like, we're already kind of getting pushed out. If you're not going to get those things now, make up for it a little bit with some of these secret scrimmages. You can schedule those at any time. I would love to be able to add one of those and just get a real measuring stick to start the season before we get into the real stuff.
I would too. I would love to see exactly where this team stands before it ever really even matters, and I think that's probably the benefit of it. And I mean, it's good for college basketball too. Right in the thick of football season, you have two well-known programs matching up, and you have it kind of all around college basketball. I think that's a pretty big deal for the sport. And if you're a college basketball fan, you want more exposure for the sport. And I think matching up programs that are Power 5 teams is how you get more exposure. You extend that calendar year out and make it and start it even sooner, playing quality matchups. That way you get away from the midweek Monday or the Monday games or the midweek Wednesday and Thursday games of like teams playing programs that you don't really know and aren't familiar with. I know you get champions and you get all those other events and stuff around Thanksgiving, but I would love to see that be a thing that Kentucky participates in. I'd love to see it be a thing that college basketball kind of just accepts around the sport entirely, and putting major matchups out there.
Yeah. And some of the other comments are talking about just are we going to win X number of games? I can't believe you guys think that we have to add somebody else to win X number of games. I don't think it's fair to, like I said earlier, I don't think it's fair to put a number on it on the low end or high end right now, because I do think, is there a chance that the team as currently constructed can win 23, 24 games next year and make it to the second weekend? Maybe. I mean, we just have no idea yet. It's just, why not add a little bit more of a safety net? Add a little bit more assurance of, just an insurance policy for yourself if you're Pope, to say, well, just in case something's not working tonight, I know Jaxson Robinson can go get himself a shot. I know Chaz Lanier can get himself a shot. Even Awuga Poplar, I know he can go get himself a shot. It doesn't mean you necessarily need it, or it's going to just dramatically change whether it's an 18-win game or a 26-win team. I would just rather have the safety net of knowing, well, I feel a whole heck of a lot better about a 26-win team with Chaz and Jaxson, or one of the two, versus neither of them. So I don't want to even put a cap or a floor on it no matter what until we see what the final product is looking like. But I do feel really, really good about the group as currently constructed. I just like a little bit more cushion. I like a little bit more of a safety net to feel just a little bit better about it.
Well, I mean, obviously early on when it all comes together, we're going to have to kind of look at this team, and roles can be established. Roles can be set in the summer, but they're not truly established until you get into that season and games start happening. Because you don't know how people are going to react. You don't know how people are going to respond. You don't know about injuries and things like that. That's another reason why I'm so glad that they're filling out the roster, is just getting those depth pieces as well, because you're going to need those bodies. But can this team become one of those teams in college basketball that can win games a number of different ways? That's going to be the key ingredient to me to whether or not this team can maybe outperform expectations, or maybe underperform, or live up to what the expectations are, whatever they are. And I don't know if we're ever really going to get a true measure of what expectations are with this group. Even when it's done and you can look at it on paper, I don't know if you're really truly going to be able to be confident in, they're a second weekend, final weekend team, or a first weekend team that's a 6 seed, 7 seed, or 8 seed. I don't know. I think it's going to kind of be all over the place. You have a defensive makeup now. You have that. You have some physicality. You've got versatility. You've got guys that can slide and play in different spots. You've got shot making. You've got three-point shooting. You've got experience playing in some of the biggest moments in college basketball and winning in big games. You've got efficient pieces. You got it all, and I do think that you have a coach that with this roster, he's going to have to coach. And I think that that's actually going to be a good thing, because I think you're going to see Mark Pope wear the coaching hat and really coach these guys up, dive into X's and O's, dive into situations. How comfortable does he get with it could depend on how far that they go as well. So, like, there's a lot of moving pieces and things to this, but they have a really solid core, Jack, that given the circumstances of having to do a complete overhaul of this thing, they've put a roster together that I think is going to be solid and have a chance.
All you need is a chance. All you need is a group enough to say, I know that these guys can play. Do they have the top end talent to kind of push you to another weekend, to give you another round or two? I don't know. We'll see. That stuff is up in the air. But I do feel that as currently constructed, this is a group that isn't going to go out there and roll over and die. Like, this isn't a group that's going to go out there and actively lose games because they just don't have the talent or don't have the grit or don't have the will to win those things. They have enough substance there to be competitive. But are they contender status? That's the only thing that we don't know yet, and that's all you can ask for when you're starting from scratch with 13 new pieces, a brand new head coach, a brand new coaching staff. That is the best you can possibly ask for. So I'm thrilled with where things are. I will be ecstatic, over the top, above the moon, if we can close out the way that we're hoping for with one or two of Jaxson Robinson and Chaz Lanier. All eyes are on those two. We are very, very excited about the possibility of both of those guys because they really, truly are game-changing talents for Kentucky, and I know Mark Pope feels that same way. So we are very much looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun weekend in Indy. Going to see a lot of the coaches, going to mingle with a lot of different people in the basketball world, so we're going to have a whole heck of a lot more to talk about leaving that event, about just what roster construction looks like and all that. So we're very excited to just kind of get the ball rolling past the honeymoon period is over. Now the roster is mostly built. Let's get into the real nuts and bolts of all this. And we're looking forward to it. Real quickly, Sean, the Source Say podcast is brought to you by Andy Ludicky and MyPerfectFranchise.net. Andy is a franchise consultant as well as franchise owner and helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he is here to help. If you have any questions about business ownership, you can learn more and contact Andy anytime at www.myperfectfranchise.net. And I just realized that I told Maria before the show started last week, before all hell broke loose with Billy and all that I was going to do that ad read earlier in the show because of how awesome Andy Ludicky is, and I completely forgot until I actually read that. So Maria, when you ultimately listen to this, I'm sorry, Andy. I'm sorry. You are the absolute best. Make sure go above and beyond for our friend Andy Ludicky of MyPerfectFranchise.net. In lieu of me, because of my failures, go above and beyond for him, because he's the absolute best, and as is Maria. So appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you guys for your continued prayers for Billy. It's been a really, really rough week here in the Pilgrim household, but we're glad to kind of put that part behind us. Glad to get back on the road, recruiting, distractions, just to focus on nothing but basketball. Only good things moving forward. We're very much excited about it. So Sean, thank you for joining us. Thank you for everybody tuning in. Where can fans find your work, Sean?
You can follow me at _Coach S. Smith. That's still hard to get used to.
You're getting close. You're just about there to nail it. Find me on Twitter as well at Jack Pilgrim KSR. Go subscribe to KSR Plus, which it's absolutely wild growing community over there. We're having a blast. Been a little bit behind with the chaos, but I assure you that the next couple of days, it's going to be the place to be. First Intel is always going to come up first on KS Boards, so make sure you go join that community. Subscribe to the KSR YouTube channel. This is growing at an absolute ridiculous rate. So thank you to each and every one of you guys for joining in on the action, commenting, even all of you dumb Tennessee fans. Thank you for giving us a little bit of entertainment value, because, you know, you're easy to laugh at and make fun of. So thank you to each and every one of you. We will see you next time.